I don't know, 19 years, but I had to use TypeScript, and at some point, and I was not very happy. I was actually less happy than to use plain JavaScript, which is crazy. And I wanted to share the idea. Well, I will never use Vaadin. I will probably use Dart and Flutter, but that's a different story. Anyway, TypeScript, I usually call it TypoScript, or in Bulgarian ТъпоСкрипт, because I feel stupid when I write it. It's a language made by микромеките или малкомеките, поне не са много меки, or Microsoft back in 2010. Now, the interesting thing is that this micromekite or Microsoft were thinking that JavaScript can be saved, and basically that's why they created TypeScript. Just for comparison, Google was thinking that JavaScript is fucked up and no one should use it, and they created the Dart language. And the Dart language is amazing. However, the Angular team, which are traitors, decided to use TypeScript and made TypeScript popular. So no one should like Angular and the Angular team. Anyway, in 2010, the Anders Helsberg, whatever, the guy who created the most of the dying languages that we use today. So this is the guy who created C#, but he's also the guy who created Delphi, and he's also the guy who created J++, by the way. Created the next fucked up language called TypeScript, which is the best of all till now. The interesting is that TypeScript is created with the idea to die. So now he knows that his languages will eventually die, so he creates a language with the idea to die. Yeah, the idea is that at some point JavaScript will catch up and will become TypeScript, so there will be no point of TypeScript anymore. We are kind of halfway there, but we are still not there, and I hope we'll never go. But anyway, the interesting thing is that Microsoft are the worst company because they usually fucked up with the open source communities by introducing a fork that is very similar to what the open source community is already using. They add some crap on it and they split the community because they don't give a shit. So that's why they created J++ and they wanted to create Java Microsoft to split the community. Good that Sun Microsystems had both at the time. That's why they created J# that only existed for, I don't know, 4 years because they actually paid license to use the Java only for 10 years. And now TypeScript is the next thing. Like they forked the JavaScript community, and yeah, what was it? Separate and rule or whatever. Anyway.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, divide and conquer. So ТъпоSкрипт or TypeScript. Before we go to TypeScript, because I know that we are Java developers and probably we don't know JavaScript. So I will just go very briefly on what JavaScript is. So first of all, in JavaScript kind of looks like Java, but you should never use equals, right? You always use 3 times equals. That's okay. Also, false and true is not what you think. There is something that they call falsy and truth. So falsy or false is everything that is false, everything that is undefined, everything that is null, 0, not a number, or empty string. Everything else is true. So if you compare something that is giving undefined, it will be false. Or comparing something that is null or 0 for crazy reason, it is true. Also, everything from Java that you know, for, while, do while, if, else, switch, labels, continue, break, continue, and label works the same. Now, in Java we have var, and by the time when we got var, JavaScript decided to not going to use var anymore. So you should never use var in JavaScript, ever. Why? Because the variables that are defined with var are basically not defined in the block scope or the block of code that they are defined in. They are hoisted, which means that they are actually moved to the outside. Yeah, and if you have a function with a function with a function with a function, and you define something in the forward down function, it's not actually there. It is in the first function. So they finally fixed that with let. So everyone is using let the same way as var, and const is for constants. Also, if you iterate for in, you should not write for variable in something, because if you iterate with in, it means iterate on the properties of object. Why? Because idiots. I don't know. But basically, if you put an object there, it will iterate on all the properties that are visible and enumerable. Keep in mind, you can define variables. Sorry, you can define properties that are not enumerable, and you will not iterate on them, which makes the whole in a bit weird. But if you want to use the normal for in, you basically have to use of, and then some array or something that is iterable. Okay. Also, there is a map. Array set, so you can use them. And in JavaScript, you can use classes. They exist since ECMAScript 2015, which is also known as ECMAScript 6, and they look like that. So they kind of look like Java, but for constructor, you call it constructor, because, I don't know. Anyway, to be different, and you don't have modifiers, public, private, whatever. You don't say what it returns, you don't say what are the types of the arguments, and you just live. Yeah, we'll go there. But you just live with your life. So basically, you forget half of the Java and you already know JavaScript. But you add equals with a triple equal, right? You can create objects with new, and you can access properties. And if you create constants, you basically cannot change the constant itself. Now, the more bigger example is this one. So it has a constructor and the field and the method, and you also have a static field and static method. So it's the same as Java, and you have static initialization block. Now, in JavaScript, there is also private fields that start with a hash. Why? So there was a notion of things that start with underscore are private, but they were never private. And in JavaScript, they decided, okay, we cannot go with underscore, because even though they are private, they might not actually be private. Let's go with a hash or prison or whatever. Now, the thing is that if you write this code, and if you try to access a private variable, in Google, you will be able to. Because Google Chrome, for some reason, gives you the possibility to read private variables. But otherwise, you cannot read them, just to be more complex. So yeah, some other common JavaScript things that you might know. So it's very common to write something like that. If something, then whatever is the default. For example, if some variable, otherwise false. The idea is, as I said, truthy and falsy. So if this is actually false, it will go to whatever this is. Also, the default value was added at some point. Again, if this is falsy, it will basically give you this example. So this is useful for default condition and for default value. Now, also in JavaScript, you have destructuring. What this means is if you have three variables, you can write something like that. AB is 10, 20. And A will become 10, B will become 20. Also, you can use the spread operator, which means you can put 3 dots, which will basically kind of unpack or pack whatever you have. For this case, we are destructuring, and at the same time, we are kind of using spread, which means everything after the 30 will go into the rest. This is something that is very commonly used, because in all the JavaScript frameworks and libraries, whatever you call them, the state is usually mutable, which means you very often change the state, which means it's very often for you to have some list of old state, and you change part of it, and then the rest is the old state. For example, yeah, this is an example of the spread. So for example, you have some numbers, and you have a method that have 3 parameters, and you have the numbers in an array. Yes, JavaScript do have collection literals. I think there was some proposal for collection literals in Java. I think it's still nowhere. I don't think that there is a collection literals in Kotlin, but there is a proposal, and of course there is a collection literals in Dart, but yeah. Anyway, so if you basically put 3 dots before the collection, it will be spread, which means that basically you will invoke the method and with the right parameters. And yeah, you can do things like that. Like in an array, you can spread parts of it in the array, and it's fine. Also about the functions, you can have functions inside functions. We will not spend more time on that. Also, so this is, okay, let's go there. So this is a function that most people will write, and most documentation you will see is using this function. Now, because JavaScript is used mostly by hipsters, they decided, there was a reason, but they decided we should do it in this way because again, hoisting of the function, and you can call it before it's defined, whatever. So you have this slightly larger syntax for the same thing. And then they said, oh, but this is basically larger. So how we can shorten it? And there is another way. But basically, if you use a normal function like this function here, and you have to pass a function to a method like the map, you can just pass it as a function, which is kind of like anonymous function, or you can use the arrow syntaxes, which is kind of like in Java, in a way, with a rocket but not an arrow.
Or Java is kind of like a JavaScript because it had it before.
Yeah, but I don't know why.
It's different.
But I don't know why they call it arrow because it's not an arrow. Anyway,
it's a house.
But the bell arrow.
The bell arrow, yeah.
Also,
It's a fat arrow.
There is difference between the.
Yeah, there is difference on how it works. Yeah, and the semantics, but yeah. There is also object literals. If you see, sometimes like you may have a function and you may create some literal like this. This is, you don't define anything. You just have this data, and you can have methods. And this is not JSON because some people call, for example, object literals JSON. JSON is something like that. JSON is very restricted on, first of all, the keys are in with quotes, and on top of that, you can only use the strict limit of data structures, right? And you cannot use everything, and you cannot have functions. And there is also a JavaScript object where you just create a new object and you just add whatever you want to this new object. Okay, basically this was JavaScript. So now you know JavaScript. Just something before we go. It's why it is kind of important. If you have a, I don't know what you see, but
Zoom. Nothing.
Yeah, I know. Let me zoom somehow. For example, if you have a function, whatever, do something, and this function, whatever, it has it has an a, and you have something like if a is equals to undefined.
You know JavaScript better than Java. 3 equals.
Console, yeah, I know. I will go there. It's undefined, whatever, and you might have else. Go away. Whatever, plus the value. Now, first of all, a few things. Now, in the old days, there was basically, it was not required, or some people were saying you don't have to put semicolons. Yeah, you don't have to. But in the old days, the way how you format your code was basically, it was very hard for the JavaScript parsers to know where the statement ends. So that sometimes if you have an if without a brackets, basically the if was empty and the code was always executed. So basically, yeah. And that's why in languages like Kotlin, you have keywords like fun. So they can actually make the semicolons optional because they can split and know that the next line is actually a new function. Anyway, what I wanted to say is if you have a variable, whatever, and this variable is just defined and you call to something with whatever, you get it, it's undefined, right? But if you say, let's say, I have zoomed too much. Okay, go ahead. If I have whatever equals to no, and if I call it, it's still undefined, right? So the reason for that is because I defined the function with 2 equals. Now, if it is defined like that, and I have it with a no, it will basically not gonna work. So the no is different than undefined. And if you see the type of no is actually object, and the type of undefined is actually undefined. So why the type of no is actually object? The creator said, I forget about this bug. So it exists for, I don't know, 20 years. So basically, no and undefined are not the same. Undefined means that the variable has never been defined, and no means that the developer have put no as a definition. Now, for you, you should not care. The only thing that you can care about is like if you have a function like this and you have, a is no. Why not? And then I have a whatever equals to blah, whatever, or something, and then I have this function with whatever. Yeah. And I get a no, right? Because someone decided to set it to no. If you, which makes sense, you say that something is no, but you cannot say this is undefined, right? Because if you call it,
no, you're fine. You should be able to. It's
you
like
should. Anyway, but the thing, but the thing is, you have a difference between undefined and no, and we will go there with the presentation about TypeScript. So now the thing is that you already know JavaScript. Now, what is TypeScript? Well, the idea of TypeScript, which is not actually the idea of TypeScript, because this existed in ActionScript. In 2003, I was playing with Flash, and Flash was using a language called ActionScript, and ActionScript was kind of like JavaScript with types. And basically, the idea is that when you can define a variable, you can put 2 dots and you can define the type. If you want.
Микрофонът ти не работи.
Добре, по-добре. Първо Стефчо ми надуга главата, и второ това така стиска главата, че не е истина. Да. So the idea is that you can put 2 dots and then the type for a function, for a return type, or for variables if it's not inferred. Now, the idea, I don't think it's proposed in 2022, but it already exists, is there is already a proposal of JavaScript with types, which means right now, TypeScript is compiled or transpiled with Babel or SWC to JavaScript. And then it's actually bundled and whatever before it's actually executed, but the proposal is that you can actually just write JavaScript with types. And the proposal and my slide is missing. And the proposal is actually there, you can check it, and it looks the same. It looks like that. So it's not confirmed, but it basically means it's not about how to define your own types or whatever, but it is to have a way to specify what are the types for functions and variables. And it is over there, and I've checked that the last commit was something like 10 days ago. So, TypeScript. There are 3 basic types, Boolean, number, and string. You see? It's clear? And you can omit them if the right side gives you enough information of what the left side is. So, in a way, TypeScript looks like JavaScript in some cases. Now, if you open the TypeScript website, it will say TypeScript is superset of JavaScript. That's false. So superset means every program written in a language can be basically copy-pasted in the other language, like as Groovy was back then before Java 8. With TypeScript, it's not like that because you cannot have a method with different numbers of parameters, or how to say it, like dynamic number of arguments, right? And which means not every JavaScript is really TypeScript. TypeScript and adding types actually limits some of the abilities of JavaScript. So it's a different set. It's a different language. Now in TypeScript you can use any if you have no idea what this is, and you get JavaScript. And you should never do that, because then why use TypeScript? But you will see any here and there if you work in a project. Usually when you have some JSON and whatever, and someone don't want to write what this JSON is actually all about, and you can usually copy-paste JSON on tons of internet websites that will give you the TypeScript definition, but some people are lazy and they just type any. Now, const we already spoke about. It works the same way. For collections, you have the number with brackets, so basically for the type of an array, you either have to use this syntax or this syntax. They are the same. So there is no big difference. There is enumerations or enums in TypeScript. Everyone is saying don't use enums, so don't use enums. Basically, you should never use enums. We'll see why. Usually a TypeScript function looks kind of like that. You have a function, you have 2 dots and what the function is returning, and you can basically call this function. Now, there is a equivalence to the first example. For example, this one is the same. This one doesn't have the return type, right? Because it's inferred, so it's the same. This one is using the fat array. or rocket, whatever. I call it rocket. And this one is the fat arrow without the rocket. And they are all the same. And you also don't need to use the return if you just type the statement that will be returned, so it's the same. So again, a lot of choices, and depending on where the hipsters are actually right now, they will say, oh, everything should be like that, or everything should be like that, or everything should be like that. No, everything, whatever. Usually there is linters. Now, I will go there, but there is a linter. Like, if you create the TypeScript project, like, you just start now, right? And you probably will gonna do something like npm create Vite. Now, where is this? Now, Vite is kind of like, I don't know what do you see, but Vite is kind of like a project generator that will generate everything for you. It will add linter, it will add bubble or SWC, it will add bundler. So what the bundler is, even though in JavaScript you can have multiple modules and you can load them, usually in a web application you don't want to create millions of HTTP requests to load some additional modules. Usually you want everything to be bundled together, so there is a bundlers. I think they even use two of them. I think ESBuild is the one that is right now used, but there is another bundler, Rollup, which is now going on a, so ESBuild is a bundler that is written in Go, so it's a lot faster, and they use it. Now there is this project called Rollup, which is used for a lot of stuff, and they are waiting for roll down, which will be used for, which will be written in Rust, and they will basically get rid of the ESBuild, and they will use only this roll down when it's available. But what's important, Vite is created by the creator of Vue, and Vite are the guys that raised I don't know how many millions now to create the next generation of JavaScript tooling, which means that Vite at some point will become even more common to see. But anyway, when you create a project, it will create a project for you. It will ask you, what do you want to use? React, Vue, whatever. Let's say React, because everything else is crap. And then it will ask you, what do you want to use? So if you just select TypeScript here, it will use Babel to make the TypeScript to JavaScript conversion. Or if you use SWC, I think SWC was written on Zeek, Rust, something like that. It's speedy web compiler, something like that. It takes a lot more memory, but it's more speedy. Now, and then you can just npm install and npm run it. Not like if I do it like that, whatever. What I wanted to show you, I forget to go in, npm install, it will just install a bunch of stuff. You will probably not gonna use npm, and you will probably gonna use pnpm, which is just npm but faster. What is important is that in this project, come on, I don't care about this internet thing. Now, what I wanted to tell you is that there are several important files, but there is a tsconfig for the node and the app, and you can ignore it. And there is a Vite config, you can ignore it for now. But there is a tsconfig that you will see very often. And in tsconfig, you can configure how the TypeScript compiler will work. However, if you just start changing the tsconfig, and you will notice in your IntelliJ IDEA, Visual Studio Code, nothing changes. It still complains about whatever it complains. The reason for that is because there is an ESLint config. So this is the ECMAScript or JavaScript and TypeScript linter, and there are rules inside this ESLint. So usually, if you want to play up with the compiler, you can play up with tsconfig, and you can get rid of the ESLint from your project. Or if you just want to configure the linter, as someone said, instead of creating a platform, you can just write your use in this ESLint config. So in this config, you can say things like, you cannot use any, right? So if someone uses any, he will get a warning. Or if you cannot use any at all, if someone uses an any, you cannot compile it. So just bear in mind that your tsconfig, and if you read the official TypeScript documentation, they will only speak about tsconfig because they don't know do you have linter. You have to actually change your ESLint. There is also a prettier, but we can ignore the prettier. It's just formatting code. Now, TypeScript functions. Now, the TypeScript functions, yes, they have a type, but you can also write something like that. So you can write basically multiple types. This is something that for Java developers is kind of weird, but in TypeScript it's not, and it's very common. Now, the other difference, we will just go there, is that you basically can combine different, how to call them, complex types. For example, this is definition of a type in TypeScript. You have an interface, or that have a name and an age. If something is knowable, you have to put question mark, but not on the type, but on the name of the field and variable, which is a bit different from what Kotlin and everyone else is doing. So Kotlin, Dart, and so on, they have a different hierarchy of types. So you have a number and knowable number. You have a string and knowable string. And you have these two hierarchies. In TypeScript, it's not like that. You only have one hierarchy, and the question mark means number, prava черта, bracket, whatever, undefined. So basically, this means that the age is number or undefined, or string is string or undefined. It just adds the / undefined with less symbols. That's it. No something strange. Now, the thing here is that TypeScript uses something called, let's go there, let's go later. But TypeScript is using structural types. So what this means is that at the end, first of all, the types will not exist in JavaScript. So at the end, if you have two different types, like one called person that have a name string, age number, and some move method that is void, and you have another interface that is called user that have exactly the same fields. They are the same. So if you have a function that accepts person, you can pass user. If you have a function that accepts user, you can pass, because it only cares that structurally they are the same. It's not only that, but actually if you have a function that accepts person, and you have these three properties on the person, you can actually pass everything that have these three properties and something more, right? Because at the end, inside of the function, you will only use these three properties. So it doesn't care what you pass as long as you have, if you have all of the properties passed. In TypeScript, you may have classes. So usually interfaces are used for just interface or a data object, and you can have a normal classes with normal properties, normal constructor, and so on. There are things like the public, where you can actually say what is public, and so on and so on. And you can create, basically, you can implement interfaces with the implement. So all the words are the same as what we know in Java. If you have a class and you want to extend another class, you use the extends. If you have an interface and you want to implement it, you use implement. So at least now, I guess Andrews knew that the two dots that he used in C# are crap, because with the two dots in C#, you'd never know which of the right side is interface and which one is class, because all of them just use two dots, and you have to prefix them, and here we have implements and extends. And you can call super the same way how you call super in Java. You can override methods like this number, that destination that you can call the super from the destination. Is the same as in Java, so nothing strange. You can have generics. Generics are used like that. Generics are even visible at a lot more than what you have in Java. So for the compiler, they are visible at all the time. And you can have things like pairs, and you can have functions that use generics. The generic type is over there. Usually it's after. So when you have class, it's after the class. When it's function, it's after the function. When it's interface, it's after the interface name. So it's a little bit more easy to understand than in Java. You can have also template strings. So if you use the strange, I don't know how it's called, but I call it the Quake 2 console button. You can basically use string interpolation, which means in a dollar you can use JavaScript functions, you can call methods and so on, and they will basically be interpolated and put inside. So in a way, there is no reason to use tilde maybe. There is no reason to use not tilde, but maybe, yeah, some people think that tilde is not a great symbol. I think it's great because it's a lot easier to hit without looking at the keyboard. You can also have read-only properties with a read-only modifier. For example, this car have a make and model and year, and in a constructor you set some stuff and they are read-only and you can change them.
also works in JavaScript, by the way, already.
Yeah, read only maybe.
No, I mean the string literals with.
The string literals are from JavaScript, so you don't need the TypeScript tool. They were added in TypeScript first, and then they were added in JavaScript as well. You can have union types. So again, what we saw with the slash, something or undefined, or number or string. You can have even more complex types, like the state is loading, which is just an object. You don't know what the object is, but you know that the object will have a property of type loading, or the object will have a property of type success with a value, or a type error with a message. And you basically can have a type, so this is a different keyword. If you use interface, so how everything becomes. So if you use interfaces, you can define properties, and you can basically extend other interfaces, and the same with classes. But then someone decided they are not flexible enough. Let's have a type as a keyword, like a type alias or type def in some languages. And you basically can say what the types are. And you can have things like this, order size, which is regular or large. Or you can have a type phone numbers, which is just a string, right? And that's it. And then you can have some logic, like if this is actually a phone number to do the validation or whatever. So this is something you cannot do with interfaces. Like you cannot create a phone number with interface that just contains a string, because with interface you will have the wrapping class. You can put a field, but then you have another dot phone. While with types, you can just have whatever you want. Now, also, you have, I said about iterate of or iterate in. This is just an example of what I said in Java. So you have one, some string, and some false. And if you just write iterate of, it will actually iterate on all of them, the same way as here. But if you use in, because you made a mistake, you will actually see the indexes. Or if you put a property, you will see the properties. So don't make a mistake to use in. It's from JavaScript, because you will not get error, right? It will work, but it will not work the way how you expect. So about the type. So you can create types, not only aliases, like here, but you can actually create actual types the same way with interfaces. So you just use type instead of interface, and you just use this slightly stranger syntax. If you read somewhere over the internet, this syntax was slower at some point in, I don't know how many years ago. So some examples still use interfaces. In reality, no one is using interfaces anymore. So in reality, everyone is using types. But depending on the company where you go, someone will prefer interfaces, someone will prefer types, the same way how someone will prefer functions, or someone will prefer constants that are equal to some anonymous function. And then you can just have an object with the...
Is it possible to implement a type? So that maybe that's
no, but there is no...
the reason to have a separation.
Yeah, I will show it. There is no point to separate, to extend the type, but I will show why. This is the example for the phone, where you can just have a validate method, and you can just have a type string. About the type assertion, so sometimes you will see someone to write something like that. You know, something casted to any and then casted to t. This is actually, don't use any. If you see some any, like, because this will always work. Like you have something, you don't know what it returns. And if you just type to cast it to t, it will sometimes say, oh, but this type is missing whatever, because the types doesn't match. But if you cast it first to any and then to t, it will always work. So you might see this in some cases. Now, the rule is never, never, never use any. They added another type on top of any. That's called unknown. Now, the difference between any and unknown is in any you can call whatever you want, and you will get runtime exception. With unknown, you cannot call anything. Now, if you want to verify that something is whatever you want it to be, you can do something like that. If this is defined, and if the type is object, however, new is also object, as you remember. And then if that's why this first part is. And then if ID is in whatever, then you can cast it to whatever. You can even cast it just to something that have an ID, because you don't care. You only need the ID. So unknown. Now, about your question, I don't know, do I have an example? So I will just write it somewhere. Come
I think they also added unknown because they wanted to separate the type that cannot accept unknown, undefined or something.
I don't know, maybe. I don't know about that. Now, just to show something. So if you have an interface person, I don't know, do I have a example? And let's say it has some age, it doesn't matter, that is number. And then you want to extend it, you know, interface old person, I don't know. And then you can say extends person. Oh man. And you can have, I don't know, pensioner, I don't know. Boolean. It doesn't matter, boom. But the thing is that ignore the old person. Now the question is, or let's say it has a, I don't know, address. It might be some complex object, it doesn't matter. Address, which is address. That is something else. Now the question is, if you use types, go away, I don't care. Which is the same. So this is the same as the first one. It's complaining because it's also person. Now, how you can extend it? You cannot extend it. Now the syntax is you just type old person, and then you can say this is the person and whatever you want. So you basically with or and with I you can just add stuff because it is just combining. It just cares about is it structured the same or not. So what you should remember? You don't need interfaces ever, unless it's actually interface. You can just use types. They are less to type. They are easier to type. You don't type extends, and you don't type implements, and you don't care. So again, status, user, and so on. You can access the stuff. This is for the no and undefined. As I said, they are not the same. And if you see type of no, it's object. Type of undefined, it's undefined. You can have index signatures. So inside of a type or interface, it doesn't matter. You can just actually in a brackets put that this is an index, and you can call this object as an array with brackets. As I said, you can have, I have a slide for that. So yeah, you can have intersections, so you can have things like that. It's very common. You are using some library, and this library is expecting whatever models you have to have a selected flag. Your objects doesn't have selected flag, so it's very common to write a new type that is your object E, and just add a selected type. So the library is happy. Now we kind of go into crazy part. You can have optional types. So for example, doc can extend, if doc extends animal, you can have whatever. So you can more or less ask what something is and what is not to make an assumption depending on that. You have things like key of. This is for, if you have something like array that is indexable, you can use the keyword key of similar to type of. That will actually return you the type of the key of this array. So for example, in this case, if I have an array that is indexable number, it doesn't matter how it's called n, and it doesn't matter what are the values. If you use the key of the object, the type that you get is, in this case, number. For a map, it's a bit weird, but the idea is that if you say key of map, you will always get a number, not only string, because JavaScript object keys are always strings. So basically, yeah, you always get the string as well as a result, because yeah, JavaScript. Now, everything to here, for me it sounded, it's okay, I can live with that. You know, you have some types, I have some types, and you can use prava or end, and you can combine types, and you can intercept types, and all is good.
It's called pipe.
Pipe, yeah, pipe or whatever. But then, suddenly, I saw that you have some utility types. Huh? And it turns out that these utility types are very, very heavily used in TypeScript. And I kind of hated them initially, and then I think they added a lot of complexity. Now, just an example for the partial, for example. You have a to-do that have title and description. And you can say, you have a function that receives a to-do, but the fields to update are partial to-do. What this partial to-do means is that even though these are not nullable fields, you can actually pass an object that contains some of the fields. So it's not the full, it creates a new class that is the same as the other class, that the to-do that you pass as a generic, but it has all the fields optional. Kind of handy, right? And yeah, it's used a lot. Now, when you read about this, and I was very, because Microsoft sucks, and I was very unhappy. So let's say you read something, you go in here, and you want to select something, and you cannot. Everything in the stupid TypeScript documentation, you cannot select anything, because, I don't know, they write it so you to read it? I don't know. So, yeah, well, I have a dark reader, so the moment when you basically turn it off or on, you can select
probably
it.
the ones that are developing the plugin, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying this. When you read about these utility classes, and you will go to read these utility classes in the TypeScript documentation. Usually in some new versions of TypeScript, they add more and more utility classes. So usually you want to copy-paste the example, right? Yeah, it's not very easy to copy-paste the example. You have to open developer tools, or you have to change like dark reader or whatever, or you have to use their run to go into their whatever and copy it from there.
Neither dark reader nor Safari are by Microsoft, so maybe not Microsoft.
I think he's using Edge.
Case.
Yeah, I'm using Edge because, but many people ask me why I'm using
Which
Edge.
is by Microsoft.
And this is the only browser for iOS, the only one that have a dark mode.
OS X.
What?
No, so let me say it. I need a browser that works everywhere, and on iOS have a dark mode.
Okay.
Because usually in bed I want to read on my phone, and only Edge have a dark mode that doesn't invert the image colors. So I cannot use Brave or whatever because they also invert the image colors. And Edge is the only one that works. If Brave fixes it, great, but they haven't. As I said, these are some optional fields. Now, the other utility class, required, it basically makes something that has been optional non-optional. Crazy, right? You have a read-only. That's very common. So as you saw in my example, I have a function that receives some argument. I can change the argument inside. I can change any property I want. But basically, you can define all your function arguments as read-only, and then you cannot change or mutate the object inside. Right? There is also another one, which is called pick. So pick is if you have an interface with some fields, you can actually say what are the fields you want. Kind of okay, I guess. There is also another one which is more used, omit. So basically just removes a field from the type.